Welcome back everybody, my name is Robert Doman, and in this video we're going to be looking at GB Studio. We're going back to basics. This is a nice, good tutorial video to help you with visual scripting. Visual scripting is how you make stuff in GB Studio, and if you don't know what GB Studio is, it is a drag and drop game engine that lets you make Game Boy games that you can play in browser and on real hardware. And just like we can see here, we can make platformers, we can make top-down games, we can make turn-based games, we can make real-time combat games. The limitations are quite heavy, but really we're only limited by our imagination. So in this video I have 5 points. Number 1, scene types. So this is basically game modes that the game is giving us that we can use as a foundation for our scenes, for example top-down or platformer. Then we have initiators, so this is going into the scenes, how we do stuff, and it's with actors, triggers, and inputs. And then number 3, we have scripts and events. So events go onto those actors, triggers, and inputs to make stuff happen. And then number 4, we have variables. So we can store information, we can check that information, and we can do maths with it, and we can do magic with variables. And then number 5, flow. How to read the scripts as if the game is reading it, so you can expect what you're gonna see. So that would be with if, events, and else's and stuff like that. So let's begin by looking at scene types. So this is what GB Studio looks like. If we look in here, we can see there's the scene that I was just in, and when I went onto this trigger, it then brought us over and sent us into this scene here. So to make a scene, you can press the S key on your keyboard, or you can go up to the top left, click on the plus, and add a scene, and then put it down anywhere you like. And so that's a scene. And if we click on the scene, on the top right, if we scroll up, we can see there's a type drop down, and each of these has slightly different controls for the player. So each of these scene types is how the player controls themselves in this scene. So top down 2D is a very rigid horizontal and vertical movement, just like Pokemon. Platformer is like Mario, where we can jump and use gravity. Adventure is more like Link's Awakening or Zelda, where you can move diagonally as well. It's basically just like top-down 2D, but with slight extra dimension. Shoot 'em up is like this scene down here, where we have horizontal or vertical scrolling across the screen, and the idea is normally that you're avoiding stuff or shooting them or shooting other things. And then point and click, I think there's a point and click scene right here, where we control a cursor, and we don't when we go into a trigger, it's not your cursor actually changes to a hovered state, so you know you can click, and then when you click it activates the trigger. And on logo, there's absolutely no triggers or actors allowed in the scene. It's just for displaying large artwork, because the Game Boy has limitations on how many unique tiles you can have in an image, and that scene type gets around that. So that's a quick rundown of all the scene types, and please remember that we have the gbstudio.dev/docs, and it tells us all of this information, but it might be harder to wrap your head around if you're not looking at something while doing it. But it has extra information, and it has an event glossary as well. So when you get deeper into things, you can look up exactly what you can do in GB Studio. Just remember, these are pieces. Everything that is written in documentation is pieces, but you have to put together these pieces in whatever way you need them to go to come up with whatever you're imagining in your brain for your game. And following tutorials won't always give you all of the pieces you might need to make your own specific things. So by experimenting and trying new things, that's how you make your game. So let's dive into the scenes. As you can see, looking around, there's already stuff going on that we might not understand. But if we zoom in, For example, we have a signpost here. Let's click on that. And this signpost is an actor. So to get an actor, you click on the plus and click on actor, and you can put another one down. You can change its sprite sheet over here to make it look like something else. And that also changes the collision box of it, if that matters to you. So if we click on this signpost, we can see there is an interact, initiate, and on update tab. These are all where we put scripts and events, but I'll get to that in a minute. Because not only do we have actors, you can also have triggers. So if we click on a trigger box over here, you can see on the right again, there is information on enter and on leave, which we'll get to in a minute. And we also have the scene itself. If you click on the background, then we have, again, on initiate and on player here on the right here. We even have little groups to do stuff. So these things is how we, these tabs on the right basically is how we get stuff done. We have triggers, actors, and scenes, but also we have inputs. So if I click on this this sign, and then I type in input, actually that's a better way. We go and look for an input. So we have to find joypad input. There it is. And we can attach a script to the button. There we go. So whichever button you choose, let's say it's the start button, and now we can add events into this part here. And so we'll go into part 3, scripts and events. So basically, scripts and events is how we change the game, how we make things happen. So for example, we can have dialogue, type in dialogue, and then we can make the text pop up on screen. It's nice that that's built in. And we can say hello when we press the start button. And unfortunately, it would overwrite the actual game mechanics right now. Currently, I think in the sample town, if you press start, it takes you to this menu page. So maybe when a button that doesn't do anything, maybe select. I'm not sure if select does anything. So you need to think about all the scripts that are possible. There's lots and lots here. So we can, for example, change the camera. We can change scene. That's a big part of games, is where you press change scene and then you choose a different scene from the drop down list. For example, the logo screen would send us back to the beginning of the game. And we can control how the player moves through our game. And these are scripts, these are events, okay? We could even affect things. So for example, the actors, we can move them. We can say, type in move. If you can't find something, then you can just type it in and look for it. Actor, move to. So I can move this sign, and nicely it's highlighting for me where I'm going to put it, and we can make it run across the map if we wanted to. A bit silly, but maybe our game's a silly game, or maybe it's not so silly after all, and it's very useful. But scenes have scripts and events, okay? So let's move on to variables. I might have to move my head out the way. If we have a look down on the left here, I'm going to close all these, we have variables. And to get up this stuff, you can just open and close these tabs. So for scenes, it might be useful to have scenes open. But let's look at the variables. So if we click on the first one, it's choice, and it might be confusing. Why is there all these named variables on the left here? But then we get to some, and there's variable 20, and we keep going down, goes all the way down to variable 511. And I believe that's because it's an 8-bit system. We have 512 variables, but I guess variable 0 is choice. Might not be. It's variable 18. So when you name a variable, its name goes into alphabetical order on the left here. And I'm kind of ruining this thing by taking away their names. But I'd kind of like to find variable 0. I knew it. It's called variable 0. And so with these variables, we can store information. So if I click on this sign again, and I go down and I say store, if I type in store actor direction in variable, store something else in variable, But how about we just do some maths? Maybe in this game we need to do some maths. So we have multiple types of variables, and local variables are variables that are only held often on a single object or in the scene, whatever piece they're on. The scene act as triggers. These have their own local variables to that piece, okay? So if you were to leave the scene and go to a different scene and find local 0 there, it's a different variable, okay? Temporary variables, I think, might get wiped when you come in and out of scenes. And global variables are the ones we care about most because you can access them from anywhere in the game. So if I click variable 0 and I say set to a value, and let's set it to 100. We like the number 100. And we can then move down this display hello, and instead, as well, display the variable 100, variable 0, I mean. So hello, and then we're displaying variable 0 here. And what that would mean is whatever is in this variable, and it will be 100 because we just set it to 100, will display as that. And with these variables, we can also say if the variable is something. So if we say if variable 0 is greater than, so comparison, if it's greater than 50, if it's greater than 50, then we have some more dialogue, and we say, wow, that's a big variable. And remember that if the text goes off the side of the box, then it will display incorrectly. So we now have setting maths. We now have using if statements to see if certain variables are whatever they are. And remember that you need to be, using different parts of your scenes to make games interesting, right? If everything is just linear, then it might not be that interesting. So think about how your games can mix it up. Talk to someone else to get their variable changed. And variable changes can be, for example, doing a task for someone and getting paid. That's a basic variable management scripts. So flow. Now let's talk about this as if the computer is reading it, okay? So, well, I say computer, I mean the Game Boy, and I mean whatever you're playing it on. So let's say we start up the game. We click on the background, and it says starting scene at the top right over here, UI/logo, and that means that's our starting scene. And if we zoom in, we can see this little orange arrow. This is our starting scene. So when we start the game, this arrow means this is where we're going. And when we change scene, it means we will move to a different scene. So let's read through as if the Game Boy is playing. So we start in this scene, and because it's a logo scene, as I've just put back to how it should be, it means we don't have a player character here. It's invisible. So not only that, it has a deactivate player. So when this scene initiates, when the game starts up, this onInitiate script will trigger, and it will be happening. So first thing is at the top, okay? So it deactivates the player. So you can't see any actor, or you can't see the player. And it might have been that this was in top-down mode before, and that's why that was important. But putting it in logo mode means that it should happen anyway. So we then have show overlay, and it's black and it's 0, 0. So if I move it, you can see we get some leeway. So let's put it back. And then the fade screens in, the screen fades in automatically, and that means that we can now see what's on screen. Otherwise, it would already be black. And then the overlay moves, so they move it down. It looks like, so it moves down. So what's happened is we put an overlay, and then the game has faded in, so we can see what's happening. And then we've moved the overlay out the way to, instead of fade in like it normally does, it faded in by the overlay moving out the way. Then waits for 2 seconds, and and then changes scene. So I'm going to change the scene to the town, sample town, and I'm going to put it over by the sign. So now, if we click on the sample town scene, we can think about how this scene moves, how the scripts are read. So it'll be on initiate. So when the scene is, when we jump into this scene, it says call the script initiate menu. We don't need to talk about that. We can look in the scripts on the left over here, and I think if we go on common, the UI initiate menu, we have a look in there. It says on attach button, attach script to button. We press start, and it stores this scene, and then it opens the menu screen. So that's unimportant right now, but just in case you wanted to know, you can call scripts. You can make scripts up here. So if we go back, it then plays a music track, but I have disabled the music track. So to re-enable it, you'd press enable event, and then to disable it, you disable event. And you can also fully delete it by clicking on that little drop-down arrow on the right of it as well. And you can also set a breakpoint, so you can make the game pause and it come up in debug mode and say we've paused the game for you. And that's really useful for times when the game, like, you have no idea what's broken and you have no idea how it's flowing, and you can press set breakpoint, and then when that is executed, it stops the game and tells you we've got to the point you told us to. So if you ever get stuck, setting breakpoints might really help you. It then attaches a timer, which is about the animating the waterfall and other animated parts of this map, which I've talked about in a previous video. So if we minimize that, it then fades in. So because we're in top-down 2D mode, we're given this player as our sprite sheet, and then we can move around. So let's say we then move over to this sign, which we've talked about already. It goes to on interact, but actually everything in this scene is then its initiate triggered, right? So on initiate, this sign does nothing. Let's find something that does do something. I'm imagining there might not be. There we go. There's one here. So on initiate, this actor, which is in the scene, is deactivated. And deactivated means it's hidden and you can't interact with it. And interacting is just going up to it with your player character and pressing A. But however, if you click on this trigger box, you can see the florist is activated, and then it moves over, says get off my flowers, and then it moves back and is deactivated again. So sometimes you would want to do stuff on that initiate to make things things be in the scene before they need to, is what I'm trying to say. And then you can make them reappear in the scene when you change variables and affect triggers and stuff. So back onto this sign. When we interact with it, it gives us the text. We attach the script to button, which actually sends us to the logo scene. So this is a very weird script I've made here. So let's fix it. So we don't want to have to press select to go and change scene, because if we press select and change scene, we've changed scene. We can't now see the sign move and have all this maths happen. So let's first of all delete this and take this out of the press select. So let's move it all out by dragging, and then we can keep this bit though. So now you can see at the bottom of here, the select button script is empty. So let's delete it. And let's have a look at what's happening. So don't feed the ducks, and then the sign moves over to here, like we said before. And then it sets the variable 0 to 100. It then displays hello and the value on the screen, the value of the variable. And then it checks if it's more than 50. It says, wow, that's a big variable. And if it's not 50, which we'll never see because it's always going to be more than 50. I also want you to take note of the else. So it would this is if the variable is greater than 50, this will happen. But if it's not greater than 50, then whatever's in here will happen. We can turn this off by disabling else, but I'll enable the else and say, wow, small variable. And small variables aren't a thing, big variables aren't a thing. It's just a funny idea. But let's press play and see what happens. So it should happen how I say, right? Where the scene is initiated, we go up to the sign, and how about we even set a breakpoint on this variable here? And that would mean that we're alerted. Oh no, I actually meant to set it on when the variable is set to 100, or actually beforehand, I think. Then it says stop. So let's have a look. So I had to press run again because I changed something. I changed the breakpoint thing while I'd already pressed play. I changed something, so I had to press play again to make sure that it was actually building what I had most recently done. So we've actually just been put straight into the scene because the logo scene loaded, then sent us straight here. So if I interact with this by pressing A, well, it's actually Z on the keyboard, sample town lake, don't feed the ducks, and then off it goes. Off goes that sign. And now it's just paused because if we have a look at the code on the right, it says, well, we've added a breakpoint to after it moves, we set the variable, and the breakpoint is telling us, Robert, we are at that point. And we've broken the game for you quickly, so you can press play or do whatever you need to do. So let's press play, and then it then displays the variable, which is after the variable is set to 100, which you can see on the right. So we should now expect to see that it says, wow, that's a big variable. And that's because it then checks the variable. Is it over 50? And obviously we're seeing right now that it is over 50. So there it is. Wow, that's a big variable. But notice that we don't see the small variable thing. Although it is in this line of succession, it's separated by this else. So keep that in mind. We're deliberately checking to see if something has happened to then show either, wow, that's a big variable, or wow, that's a small variable. So yeah. So let's go over to that sign and see what happens this time. Can you predict what will happen? I hope you can. And what will be the difference? Answer me that. So it's happening again as we expect. Don't feed the ducks. It then pauses because we're setting the value of the variable to 100. Didn't change anything really because it was already 100, but it now says hello and then the value of the variable, and then says, wow, that's a big variable. But did you notice how it didn't move that time? And that's because it was already in that position. So technically it moved, but it didn't actually go anywhere. So we have now talked about scene types, initiators, scripts and events, variables, and flow. And like I said, all of these pieces put together is how you make a game. You have characters that give you information, that tell you where to go in locations, which scenes to travel between. You have scripts that check variables and values and move things. And by reading through the flow of the scripts, you can predict what will happen in the game. And by pressing play and setting those breakpoints, you can see, is it working how I thought? And will the player be happy with their experience? So I think this video is a bit longer than I wanted it to be. However, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you are a bit more confident to see what GB Studio can do for you. I hope these back to basic videos are useful. I understand that some people are way beyond even my skill at this point. They've been using GB Studio for years. They've watched all my videos 100 times, and so this video is a bit more for the newbies. So I hope you appreciate that. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Bye bye.